Okay, I'm very pleased to introduce someone who most of you already know, but introduce Dr. Jen Dolan, who will introduce our panel for this morning. Since the very early days of our Rudd Adoption Research Program, Jen has worked together with me to help build something that we hope has been useful and informative for all of you and for the adoption community. She's brought rich personal and professional experience to her work, including her dissertation work on the intersectionality of race and adoption and parenting. She's been a strong partner in all of our work in the Rudd program with special focus on our community partnerships, especially in the Adoption Mentoring Partnership and the Re-envisioning Foster Care Initiative. She's been a valuable member of our team as we've moved forward with this program, and please join me in welcoming Jen Dolan.
Okay, I'm a little nervous with this microphone, but it's wonderful, as I'm sure you can imagine, to work with the Rudd Adoption Research Program and with Hal. And of all the days of my work, the day of our conference is by far my favorite. It's just so nice to be able to see all of you, and it really is an honor for me to be able to introduce this panel. And I'm realizing this is the first time now that I need my readers. And I'll also mention I have a little more gray hair, but I do have 3 teens. So I'm honored to have the opportunity to introduce this panel of amazing parents. 3 years ago at our conference, we had an afternoon breakout session that consisted of a similar, although not exact, configuration of parents from adoption journeys. The feedback we received from the participants was so fabulous that we decided to invite them back to be on a panel for all of you to hear. We have gotten together a few times over the last several months, and as I would sit and listen to their stories, I was in awe of their level of knowledge, the intensity of their stories, their ability to laugh, their strength, their commitment to their children, and their commitment to the adoption community as evidenced by their presence here today. I'm going to introduce the chair of the panel, Nancy Solow, who will then lead the panel. Nancy Solow is a clinical social worker on the regional response team of Adoption Journeys in Florence, Massachusetts. She's a graduate of the Smith College School of Social Work and specializes in post-adoption services, including family work, adoption identity, attachment trauma, group work, and adolescence. Nancy provides services to a wide variety of adoptive families, including counseling and advocacy with mental health and education systems. She has worked with foster and adoptive families since 1990, beginning with families in Vermont's child protective sector. Her professional experience also includes 10 years with Casey Family Services in Vermont, and for the past 10 years, Adoption Journeys in Massachusetts. She's a certified trainer in adoption competence for the Center for Adoption Support and Education, and currently provides training to clinicians in Central Massachusetts. In addition, Nancy trains school personnel in strategies for helping students who have histories of attachment trauma. So please join me in welcoming Nancy Solow and this wonderful panel of adoptive parents.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you so much for inviting this panel. It's, I think you're going to hear where the real heart of the work is, and it's my privilege to work with parents, these parents and parents like them every day. I learn so much from them every day. Adoption Journeys is a statewide voluntary post-adoption program. We have 5 offices throughout the state. It's open to any and all adoptive family, whether adoption happened through the public system or private internationally, private domestic. We provide a broad range of services, including support groups for parents, activity and support groups for kids, social events throughout the year, and clinical in-home services. And I'm sure I left something out of that, but it's a wide swath of services, advocacy, referrals. I'm really delighted to be here. As I said, I learn something from these parents every day, and I'm really glad that you all are going to have a chance to hear from them. I think some of the themes that you'll hear are that, the title of this today is Overcoming Childhood Adversity, and I think one thing you'll hear from these parents is that it's really in integrating their children's childhood adversity. It's a long arc of healing. We heard a little bit from Dr. Fisher about what's effective in healing, but I think one of the points is that healing happens over a long arc, that the consequences of children's early trauma comes up in different ways at different points in development. There are different opportunities at different points of development, and that some things work better than others, and that it's a learning process. And I'll let them tell you themselves. They have the direct line to it. I also just wanted to point out there were great questions after Dr. Fisher's presentation about what the challenges are that children bring into the home. I think the home really is the place of healing, but when we were all pushing those nines or moving your finger to the nines, I was sort of relating it to when those parents get that no, or that I hate you, or the I can't do it, or whatever the 9 is in their homes. It's part of the process for parents is to overcome their own impulse to react to the 9, and these are parents who have been through that and have a lot to share. So I'm going to let them each introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their stories and what's worked for them.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lawton-Singer, and my wife Cynthia and I are the parent of our adoptive daughter, Kelsey. Kelsey came to us back in May of 2007, just shy of her 5th birthday. We were her 5th different living situation. She came under the protection of the care of custody of the Department of Children and Family at the age of 2 years and 2 months, and was moved around. She has 2 siblings. She's the youngest of 3. They were, unfortunately, all placed with different situations. They felt that it was in the best interest because there was that much unfortunate circumstances that had happened earlier on. Certainly, our daughter had experienced a lot of neglect, certainly witnessed a lot of physical abuse, no doubt was a recipient of some physical abuse, and really came to us with a lot of developmental delays, her speaking, her pattern of speech, and that was certainly, I would say, probably a couple of years behind. And I think something which came up to me this morning was, I think for a lot of children who come from homes, unfortunately, where they are taken and put under care and custody, is that they also have a stigma, because my daughter would say to some of the kids, and she was in school, I have many different moms. So for most children, that kind of background, they kind of looked at her as a kind of a 3-headed hydra. And maybe at that time, probably she wasn't really aware of just how deeply that could set her apart. But as she got older, I think that it certainly caused a huge amount of shame. And I think that for a lot of children, the background of having that type of situation, of being placed in different situations, it brings up a lot of fear as well, and and sadness. So there's a lot of healing that has to go on. I can offer a perspective in working with excellent folks here at Adoption Journeys, also the Attachment Institute of New England and Worcester, and Clinic and Support Options, is that we had talked of the ARC, but really my perspective is that we can be, we have to be the rock ourselves, and that's certainly a perspective that was reinforced in the good work with the Attachment Institute, was that it really comes down to the parents being the nuclear part of everything. Kind of like think of a child being placed on planet X from planet Y and not knowing who they are. They fish, fowl, or beast, and certainly my daughter was that. So no sense of self-identity, certainly lacking any bit of self-confidence or esteem, and always looking for an opportunity to be oppositionally defiant. So really what it came down to is for Cynthia and I is getting ourselves into a situation where we're supported and we're having fun and having passion in our lives, and being a good model, not because we're showing something, we have something to prove, it's because we're living our lives. And it's really sounds like tough love to a degree, maybe it is, but it's really up to the children to want to bring themselves up to getting to themselves to the point of doing the hard work and a lot of healing. And, you know, from my daughter's experience, she was removed. She did lose. She has a lot of loss and a lot of grief. I think to look over that or gloss it over and in couchy words would really kind of, to a degree, invalidate her human experience, but also to realize that, you know, we love her, we're committed to her. There are some times where she can be totally impossible. As much as possible, we try not to take it on. We live in a hill town up in Conway, Massachusetts, where there's lots of beautiful areas to walk around and be in nature and decompress, which for her is really important. And for all children, having the lack of stimulus is extremely important since they're hypervigilant minds and need to decompress. And certainly being in nature is one great way for that, but we'll go out and just take a break. You know, we have our routine for kind of lockdowns, so Kelsey, our daughter, can stay safe. Children in this background have an overarching need to have safety and push the limits of safety at all times. So when she's feeling unsafe, what we'll do is, you know, we'll do lock down certain areas of the house, and we'll take a break for a half hour to an hour. And at first we had some trepidation to what's going to be like when we come back, but when we came back, she was calm. She was relaxed. It's the constant wanting to intrude and trying to fix things that I think triggers. And what we've experienced is that's quite the opposite. Is children need to calm down. Something has happened. I have no idea what triggers can be sometimes. I think I have a better sense now. But really to give them the space to kind of get in their own skin again. We started working with the Attachment Institute approximately 1 year ago. Our daughter was on a fairly heavy dose of Ritalin equivalent. It was about a month later that we had a really traumatic experience, and I realized that it had nothing to do with ADHD, it was really trauma. And I decided at that time to take her off the medication. She's been off the medication now about a year, it'll be a year mid next month. Over the last year, her weight has gained tremendously. Her performance in school has improved. She's connecting with children her age around activity-based as opposed to kind of dysfunctioning behavior. And I had kind of a really incredible breakthrough, I think, earlier this past week, actually. I could come home from work, and she asked me how my day was, which is really amazing. And I said, well, thank you very much for asking, because I always ask her how her day was. And, you know, usually it was, you know, basically, you know, get out of my life, get out of my way, or just grumpy and, you know, getting really irritable. So I knew to drop it. And I thanked her very much. I didn't want to make too much of it. And what I did say is, you know, it was really great, and I did this and that. And I was, thank you very much for caring. Thank you for asking, you know, and how was your day? So there's hope. If I can offer to parents is that with the right thing, and what I can offer is that you'll never control the child. That's just a futile effort. What you can do is control yourselves, keeping yourselves regulated first as the source, and then controlling the environment and thinking ahead, you know, loving with your heart but guiding with your head at all times. And that if you can master that, I think what you can do is create a safe space for your child or children with attachment trauma issues to feel comfortable, be in their own skin. Our daughter is sleeping a lot more now, which is really good when she came to us. I remember one time I took her to a park, and we had a blast. And I said, well, I was 4 hours running around. You would think a kid at the age of 5 would, you know, want to take it. It was the middle of the summer. And she lied in the blanket, and she had one eye open looking at it at all times. And I was like, wow. And I just said, well, you know, she said to me, can we sleep here tonight? And I was like, no, unfortunately, I forgot the toothbrushes. We have to go home. She said, okay, and we packed in. But to give you an idea of hypervigilance and what that means, and for a lot of kids, just calming down and relaxing is a huge way of healing.
Thank you, Alan.
Hi, I'm Margo Chapski, and I am an adoptive parent of, currently she's 14 years old. She came to us at age 6.5, originally through disruption. She's from Russia. She was born at 28 weeks gestation and was put in a NICU and then a baby home and then a children's home, and finally at age 5.5 she came to America, was living with another family outside the Boston area, and they disrupted, and that's how she came to be with our family at age 6.5. We have had lots of struggles along the way. The very first struggle that I remember was having no services available to help us through the honeymoon phase. So when she entered our home in the end of January until she was formally adopted, which was in the end of December, we had absolutely no services available to us. We had a social worker from the North Shore area who would do the once a month or once every 3 months, I don't even remember, it was so insignificant, some sort of visit that they had to do. But what they couldn't help us with was the day in and the day out trauma outbursts that were going on during that time. And being an inexperienced adoptive parent, you know, here I am comparing my situation to my neighbors with the little white picket fence and saying, why isn't my kid behaving like that kid? And it was, that's when it occurred to me, this is not your typical child, you know, things are going on that I needed to learn about. So in that 9-month period, I had to use the internet. I remember calling up Adoption Journeys, and Deb said, oh, I can't work with you because she's not adopted yet. And I'm like, what do you mean? My kid's coming at me with a knife in her hand. What do you mean? I need help somewhere. I got to do something. And, well, you have to wait till she's adopted. No. I didn't have time to wait until she was adopted. I needed something in the interim. So, of course, you know, thanks to technology on the internet, I went and I started to find all of these articles and research papers, and, you know, I earned my PhD. I started to look at her developmental milestones, and I do have my notes here, and I do need my glasses. But like, you know, with her ADL tasks, brushing her hair, brushing her teeth, dressing, tying shoelaces. At age 6.5 to 7.5, this child was not able to do this independently. Boy, that raised a flag, you know? And I said, okay, something's going on. Gross motor activities, crawling. She was not able to do reciprocal type of movements, or she wasn't crossing midline, and, you know, she was doing all these awkward kind of, she couldn't hop on one foot and advance. She couldn't do jumping jacks, and at the Attachment Institute, one of the things they had her doing was jumping jacks, and she couldn't do it. And I was like, wow. Okay, something's going on. Then I realized relationships. She was clueless. She would go indiscriminately with anybody, and then the next day be on me like, you know, a jacket I would wear. It was like she didn't understand how to be in relationship. Behavioral concerns, no, absolutely no awareness of safety. Would walk right across the street without looking twice. This is a child who's 7 years old. I'm like, something is mismatched, you know? Communication. Because she's from Russia, her first language was Russian. And yet when she arrived in America, she had very little language skills. She could speak it, but she didn't understand it. And so, you know, everything came out, you know, different than what it meant. She always used the word jealousy for when she was angry, for when she was upset, for when she was hurt. You know, I'm feeling very jealous. And it's like I had to sort of take that apart and say, well, you know, jealousy is this, hurt is this, happy is this, and sort of break everything and teach her what these different emotions were. You know, and then cognitive and perceptual skills, oh my goodness, you know, I put her in the school environment, and, you know, oh yeah, she did great, she's a wonderful student, but she wasn't learning. And she'd come home and be disruptive and completely off the wall, trashing my house for 4 or 5 hours at a time. So, you know, it's like, okay, we've been there, we've done that, and now I figured out what helps. And what has helped is during all that time, I got in there with her, okay? I went back I started crawling on the floor with her. I started rolling around. I started connecting with her. If she couldn't tolerate the eye-to-eye connection, that was okay. I started to just accept where she was. And then at that point, with a lot of classes, like Beyond Consequences, Logic, and Control, I was learning how to use the positives, those little tiny positives, and build those up. I had support from other parents. I finally adopted and was able to get involved with Adoption Journeys, thank God, because I'm still involved with Adoption Journeys. We have come together as a community of support with other adoptive families, that's tremendous. We help each other, we teach each other, we support each other, we provide respite for each other. Conferences, classes, any kind of education I can possibly get, I take.
I'm Karen Green, and I have a biological daughter who is 20, and my partner and I decided that when our daughter was 8 that we would foster one child. We had room, time, love. So at 3.5, we took in our foster daughter. Certainly with all her challenges and background of domestic abuse and drugs, and sexual abuse was not clear but probable. So she was in our home till 5 and was going to go back to her family, but that became impossible. So we were faced with the decision of, do we adopt her or not, which was tough, because we had had a 1.5 years, and it was an incredible challenge, and she was an amazingly wonderful, charming kid. And our daughter has an uncanny intuition, I would say, and when we were trying to decide, literally, she looked at us one morning and said, "You're my growing up family." And that helped us decide, yes, we'd go ahead and we would adopt her. We adopted her when she was 5, and her definition of adoption, which is the best I've ever heard, is adoption is when you marry a kid. So even though, we weren't sure always what was going on with her, she would come out with these remarks that would just stop us in our tracks. And I'd like to bring her voice into the room. She wrote this poem in 7th grade. They were given the prompt, "Where I'm from." Where I'm from. I am from the middle of nowhere, a place where all I can hear is the sound of arguing from another room and large trucks driving by. I am from kicking and screaming while I am being taken away without getting a chance to say goodbye. I am from walking through puddles on my way to being put in a car with some guy I don't even know, but begin to like. I am from Rugrats backpacks, coloring books, crowns, and lip gloss. I am from new beginnings, vacations with my family, and tripping over magazines that I left on the floor. I am from pressing the snooze button on my alarm clock and not waking up until my chihuahua hops on my bed and kisses me all over my face. I am from a place with no answers, somewhere that everything is left a mystery, unable to be solved.
Yeah.
I asked her permission to read that, and she had to think about it. But she did give me permission. So in terms of parenting, I guess I think of it as an evolving response over the last 12 years to dealing with adversity, because what works on one day may not work on another. And we've certainly had to let go of some expectations, be flexible. And I'd like to take the image of A Place at the Table, which was a book written by a local foster parent. A place at the table, it always struck me. Yes, of course we want every child to have a place at the table. But what does that table represent? I grew up in a family where you came to dinner. Everybody came to dinner. That was expected. And so I wanted that for my own family. Well, the truth is that my daughter had a hard time coming to the table. Or she would come to the table, she'd throw a tantrum, she'd interrupt. She'd have a meltdown. Coming to the table was not much fun. When she first came to us, she picked up her dinner plate one night when we had a male friend to dinner, and she said, "I'm not eating at this table with that man." And she took her plate and went someplace else. Talk about resiliency and guts and chutzpah. She was 3.5. So, yeah, what did the table mean to her in that moment? As time went on, at birthdays, rituals, celebrations, they were the hardest coming to the table for her. At my daughter's birthday, when she was probably 7, 8, she picked up her plate and said, "I'm going to ruin this dinner, so I'm going to take my food up to my room." She was very aware of how she couldn't come to the table. And table representing intimacy. Last week at the New England Attachment Institute workshop, when they talked about how kids should be able to control their intimacy level, and that means when they come to the table, when they don't come to the table. I just learned that last week, but I've been living it for 10 years. As time's gone on, what she does now is she sits in a rocker by the kitchen table. She listens to our conversation, but we don't make her come to the table. Last week, she was in another room eating dinner, listening to us. I never know her relationship to that table and the intimacy, but letting her participate in her way and my giving up my expectation about the table, we've learned over time. Recently, we had dinner, we started to have dinner, and she said, "Why didn't you call me down?" Anyway, so certainly we've learned about how to let go of expectations. On our parent journey, adoption journeys has been invaluable. Where is the language, of trauma and trauma-informed practice, and how do couples survive? And I think, adoption journeys met with us as a couple to help us. They've coached us. They've shown up at IEP meetings. Schools, as we've heard. I hate to say it, but it's pretty tough. My daughter's been in 5 schools, and that I really didn't want it to go that way. But I'm happy to say at this last school, yesterday, when she recently reunited with her birth family, which has turned her world upside down, though Adoption Journeys has coached us that it's necessary for her to be whole, and I believe that. In the school she's in now, she went in, she said, "I can't go to class." They let her sit in a room by herself and do Sudokus, because that's what she needed. And she didn't have to go to class, be expelled for bad behavior. She was allowed to just feel safe. And it's a long search, and certainly educating schools is going to take a long time. So I'm happy to say now, with her being reunited with her birth family, when she talks about she has no answers and it's all a mystery, well, it's not so much a mystery anymore. She knows her mother liked spicy Mexican food, and so does she. She's learned that her, birth mother loved animals, and so does she. And little by little, the pieces are coming together for her. And after 12 years, she will now, on her birthday in May, receive presents from her birth family. Birthdays are a big deal. And her birth family will be able to talk to her about birthdays. So, it's quite a journey, and we're walking at her side, and I think with the help of Adoption Journeys and other resources that we absolutely need, I think every parent that adopts through the state should get a manual on attachment issues and a video and everything we can from day one. That would be my wish. Thank you.
I'm Carmel Steger, and it's been really thought-provoking to listen to the challenges that each of my fellow panelists have experienced with raising their children and with their partners. Today marks 19 years and 3 days, to be specific, since my husband and I brought our 2 daughters home from the Philippines. It was on April 8th, 1995. And so though my jaw drops with that calculation, I realize that our upheaval and the resources that we needed and frantically sought to get were 10 years ago. Still, there's a few ways that we needed to learn to parent differently that are worth explanation. Our two daughters were 8 years old and 13 months when they came home. They had been cared for in an orphanage in the Philippines by the Sisters of St. Joseph, and they were there for about a year while they were looking for a family who would adopt both of them. It was the answer to our dreams. We had put a lot of preparation into them coming home, as any adoptive family does. We had our oldest daughter go back to school, even though it was, she had finished second grade in the Philippines, but go back to second grade so she could kind of immerse herself in the end of the school year and get used to the language and just, socially and the part of, the educational curriculum. And she happened to have a teacher, a second grade teacher who was an adoptive mom, so it was a really great bonus for us. To maintain my daughter's privacy, I'll refer to her as Teresa. At the same time, we were learning how to parent our younger daughter, who was 13 months old. So to say taking on the roles of being mom and dad were just like lightning speed. It was, that's just how it was. We built on the interests and growth of both the girls and read as much as we could about adopting the older child and keeping the cultural connections going with their, their Filipino community, which we had in our area, and within our family. To us, we had formed as a family unit, grew this when we brought Teresa back to the Philippines 3 years later when we brought our young son home with us. She, in fact, was instrumental with him being able to bond with us. He was terrified of white people, I think. It's a kind of a funny story when he saw us and he freaked out, and we thought this might not be a go. But since she was with us, he eventually went to her, and we felt as though everything that we had planned for and worked on was coming together. Less familiar to us was how much privacy and alone time we should give our daughter, and as she became an adolescent, she spent a lot of time in her room, and we felt as though she needed that because she came from such dire poverty. If anybody's ever been to a third world country, they know exactly how hard it is for children especially. They don't have anything, and oftentimes they're put in prop positions to beg and steal for adults. And we knew that Ren's 7 or 8 years there, she had seen a lot of real hardship and had spent that time with her birth mother and her extended family. So we just didn't see where the weak spots were, and we didn't know what we should be looking for in terms of attachment. So she was a quiet, polite little girl, and she seemed to have a lot of resilience given the circumstances that she came from. So it wasn't until we were in the midst of her teens that it all unraveled, but we still had difficulty distinguishing it as purely an adolescent phase, normal adoption issues, or something more serious. Teresa began to lie, steal, run from us, and generally cook up profound amounts of turmoil. We weren't able to keep ahead of it. There was conflict around every corner, and what we didn't realize that it was all a subterfuge for her to put some distance between us in order to feel safe from intimacy and safe from what we had as a family. And her grades in school, they tanked. She was indifferent to that, even though she said that she really wanted to go to college. Instead, she started becoming very, very loyal with students who weren't working hard at all. She would not turn in her own work or help people cheat just so she could maintain a lower grade level that they were doing. All the while, we were just trying to reason with her and work towards a plan to help her continue through this phase of knowing that this was her, that we were her family, but that we would help her become more independent and work towards college if that's what she wanted. And at this point, the story doesn't need to unravel here any more than it did then. We had been using post-adoption supports. We found adoption journeys, and they had been really, really helpful to us. We read everything that we could. We tried to get Teresa into therapy, but she didn't want to be there. And we just tried to read every attachment article we could find, but it wasn't really keeping us going in a direction we felt like we could sustain. She would find ways to disrupt any time we had planned good times together. It wouldn't be something that would ever happen because there would be something that she ran from, or we'd find out there was some big debacle that we weren't prepared to deal with. And so what we were dealing with each day was just the fragmentation that Teresa knew so well from her past and the hiding of what was really going on in her head. She'd be somewhere completely else when we were trying to figure out how to fix the problem right here. Making it seem like we had, for an instant, figured out what we needed to next do, only to have those steps fail to build any lasting understanding or connection. So as a group of panelists, we considered these questions and just thought we'd share them with you. What aspects of parenting your child were hard? Well, it was hard to reconcile teaching our daughter the values of honesty, hard work, kindness to others, and then see her acquire none of them in favor of what we could estimate were some of the skills that she learned from her biological mother and the background that she came from. We didn't have a cogent picture of that at all because the child study report was very limited and Teresa didn't really tell us any details of her earlier life. It was also hard to have dramatic swings in reaching an accord with her after an episode of misconduct and then be right back in the middle of another conflict. We found it difficulty to keep stability for our younger two children in the face of what became perpetual unrest and unhappiness. Unfortunately, we had decided that at age 20, Teresa could no longer live with us, and that was the hardest decision we ever reached as parents and not arrived at mutually. It was very sad, the antithesis of a commitment to a forever family we all make, and the lesser of two bad choices. But it gradually allowed us to forge together as a family of four, being open about our decision, the inherent loss, and knowing that this would raise a whole new set of anxieties for our younger two. What we figured out on our own, after a period of time in which Teresa wasn't in touch with us, we were able to get a hold of her and meet. And my husband and I had no idea what we would do, how we would conduct this meeting, and we just desperately wanted her back in our lives and wanted to figure out some way to do that without her blowing out again because she couldn't handle the intimacy. So we just decided that we would start at square one, we called it, and we wouldn't look for any explanations anymore. We would set our expectations really low. We wouldn't look for answers about why she had done some of the things that she had done, and she wouldn't try to get us to do something for her that would just take advantage of things again. And that seemed to be the best place for us to start. And we just very gradually worked on staying in touch with her and trying to support her going back to school and being in a healthy relationship and moving ahead with her life as an adult. She's now a mother herself. She gave birth to a little boy last June, and so we have a grandson, and he's adorable. And she's really making her way in the world. And we work on the things that we missed out in life. At any chance that we get to be together, we are. We missed a whole swath of time in her teens, and that affects us as well as our two other children. And we just do what we can to build a better bond now.
Thank you, Carmel. So I think you have a sense that we could probably spend a whole day with these parents instead of just these few minutes. Their stories are so rich. I hope you heard in those stories some of the serve and return examples at different ages and stages when trauma comes up at different points in a child's life, as well as the self-care that's needed to stay steady. And we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. If you can come up to the microphone or find the person who's passing the mic around before lunch.
Hi, my name is Tanner Bryan, and I'm a student at Clark University. I work in Dr. Goldberg's lab on adoption. And I've worked with Wadiko Children's Services. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
But it's a really excellent place for kids from all kinds of backgrounds, including like adoptive kids and from trauma and things like that. And part of the time I've worked with them, I really had to understand how they express themselves, and it was a whole new sort of like lexicon to kind of understand their own experiences. And definitely hearing how you all spoke about like understanding their language. I think, for instance, you said your child said she was jealous when she meant she was angry, and also sort of understanding their different levels and different ways they express their intimacy and attachment and needing cool downs. Those are all things that I'm kind of familiar with, and those were really cool to hear. But I was just wondering, how did you sort of, after understanding and recognizing these needs of the kids, how did you talk to and discuss with like school, like in the school systems, and ways that they could like implement to also assist with their behavioral needs when they weren't at home with you all? If y'all could speak to that, I was just curious.
It's pretty tough because it is a different language, and schools don't necessarily speak that language. And they have a job to do, and they have their traditional discipline response, and their goal is to keep kids in classrooms and not have them need something else. So, I mean, I did at one point have Adoption Journeys come in and do a workshop with one of the schools. I don't know if it made much of a difference. I think that schools have to see it as part of their commitment to these children. And there's some schools, whether they're private schools or charter schools, depending on their mandates, they may or may not see their mission as serving kids who have these extra needs. So, I mean, ultimately, I think teachers have to be trained differently. Schools have to be committed to serving these kids and using a trauma-informed lens to respond. Because without that, these kids just look to me oppositional and defiant and insubordinate. That's what they come off as, troublemakers, whatever. And as they get older, it's harder because schools, we have all the bullying and zero tolerance policies, and they aren't necessarily what these kids need. So I don't know. You have to search far and wide to find school systems that have any sort of a trauma-informed care and response to kids.
What I ended up doing from the very beginning is I had to go in at the beginning of the school year, a couple of days prior. I would meet with the team, because I very quickly got her on an IEP, and so I would meet with the team, and I'd say, this is what you're going to see. This is what I see at home. Somewhere along the line, the two aren't mixing, and we have to make this work. And then I would every year reorient the staff that she was working with. And to this day, she'll be going into 9th grade in the fall. To this day, I do that every single year. And I bring them up to the bar of where she is at and let them know that and maintain very open communication.
One of the things I often say to school staff is to try to boil it down to fear or anxiety, to read the behavior through that lens, and the developmental lens, to approach that child where they are in that moment with a fear response where they are developmentally. Because as you all know, what trauma does is we heard this from the folks from the Attachment Institute just last Wednesday night, trauma kind of throws out age. You can be any age at any moment because you can be brought back to the that fear response that comes from early trauma. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, one of the other things that was really important for us is homework for my daughter was a significant issue at home. In first grade, when I was spending like 2 hours on how to write ABC or whatever, that was getting a little ridiculous. And when, she was having tantrums left and right, something wasn't working. Her IEP is now written to the point where I've not had homework in my home since 2nd grade because it was too traumatic of an event. And I told them, I said, I have things at home to work on. I can't teach her all of this when I have to teach her life, You teach her education, I'll try to get the rest under control, Yeah.
These kids have to be doing the serve and response at home.
I would just add in about the homework. Everyone's an expert, and the Attachment Institute said the school's role, they're the expert educators, and they need to educate themselves what it's like to raise children with attachment trauma. So everyone has a role, and there's a team, and I've made it very clear that as a parent, we're the quarterbacks of the team. So we have Adoption Journeys, certainly with their programming, clinic and support options. It meets with the special education person at our school, the principal, and the particular grade school teacher for our daughter. So it's a team, everyone has their expertise and role, and as a parent, it's really important to make sure that everyone is on the court and playing together.
Any other questions? Somebody was pointing over here. There's one.
So I'd like to ask a little more from the parents if they could elaborate on self-care, and just to tag on to the last question regarding education with kids with attachment trauma. If you're aware of the paper by Larry Smith from Baltimore, Maryland, called Oil and Water on kids in the educational setting, that was really, really helpful. What's all that great self-care that you're doing? Did any of you do EMDR yourselves? Were there particular things that you found helped you regulate enough to be able to support your kids developing regulation?
Oh, self-care, I mean,
I can start if you want.
you mean how to take care of ourselves?
Yes, please, steps, details.
Alan has a response.
Where's the bottle?
I mean, yeah.
Just kidding.
So that's not self-care. So anyway, in terms of of self-care, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. And so that comes from the standpoint of if you're going to have a child who basically is dysregulated at any point in time, that you as a role model need to keep yourself regulated and has to be authentic. So, for example, over the past year, my wife is a professional garden designer. We bought a new house in an area which is a beautiful part in Conway, Massachusetts, and so we're making. Okay, so we in an area we live in a beautiful area. We have a passion for the outdoors, so we're in an area where that is right in our back step. It's also great because that means there's very little chance our daughter would have to walk down the street and get in trouble, which was certainly the case before. So that's an area. So having an environment that supports who you are as a manifestation of who you are and your values, as the primary caregivers, is probably the greatest form of self-care. There's things going out and having fun together. I mean, that's important too, but really it's the home environment, and it should be an environment that supports you and is integrated, it's holistic. That's unique to your own defining.
It's hard. As a parent, sometimes we feel like, oh, we always put our kids first. Well, maybe all parents have to learn that, but I think especially parents like us have to really learn self-care. So that means that if you're going to go out to dinner and the child's having a meltdown, I mean, obviously it depends on the age. If she's 14, well, we walked out the door and went to dinner anyway. And so she stayed back. When we needed a break, if she was having a meltdown, the idea of, okay, giving her space and us calming down, we'd go walk the dog to calm down and then come back, because there is no way that you can engage, if you get into that trap of, they're upset, they're melting down, and you go to that level with them, it's not going to be good. So ultimately, you really need to calm down and figure out how to do that. And as the Attachment Institute said, and I like this, they want a power struggle. Don't pick up the rope. Don't do it. You just really, really have to yourself walk away, calm down. And, it's very tempting. And I had picked up the rope, and it wasn't fun, and it wasn't good for anybody. So that's absolutely, there's some golden rules there. And if, as parents have alluded to, as soon as you can get some of these golden rules, when you go to parent these kids, the better. Right, 10 years ago, I wish I had known some things, but we're learning, but we have to get information to parents quicker, sooner. There's some really basic principles that really would help us out, because a lot of the information is counterintuitive. It really is counterintuitive. You can't just by regular old parenting get it. You really have to understand these kids.
I noticed that one of the elements in the ADOPT program that Dr. Fisher was presenting was fun, and that is a huge ingredient. Dan Hughes says laughter cancels out shame, and that's true for both child and parent, and it's just so essential.
Yeah.
So
And that's, And that's what I was going to say. You know, as a family, we like to be very active. So we have winter sports. We ski, we snowshoe, we go on winter hikes, we take the dog out. And if our daughter chose not to do that, we would also practice the same principle. It's like, well, okay, are you safe here? If not, one of us would stay back with her to create safety, and the dog would still get walked. So it wasn't that, you know, we purposely excluded her or tried not to continue to do our life activities, our fun things. We just made it work in such a way that she got her needs met, we got our needs met, and we move on. And each situation that occurs is basically the same format, repeated over and over and tweaked. Given, but we still do all of our swimming, we go boating, we do all of these things. It just might look a little different in a little different context, and now we're adding a little bit of age, and you know, it's just kind of a big thing, you know, it just is.
So we need to have a little bit of time for announcements before lunch. Lunch is next. Thank you for those great questions. We are all going to be eating lunch together right here, so if you have more questions or want to talk to any of these parents or to us, we're going to be right there. Thank you.
Great. I really want to thank our panel. This was a wonderful, wonderful session that really pulls together a lot of what we've been talking about already and gives us more kind of work to be talking about this afternoon.